Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. We're back for another episode this week. It's a new week. We've had a midweek round, two game weeks since we last spoke to you on the podcast. I hope you had a great week. And I'm not only joined by one guest this week, I'm actually joined by two. But before we get into that, firstly, my good friend and colleague, Steve Wyss, how are you doing?
Jonathan, I'm pretty well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. It's been a quite a interesting week, really, in Scandinavia. You know, we're getting towards the end of the season now, isn't it? This is the business end. Every point counts, every game matters, and it's really heating up in both leagues, which we're going to talk about. We're going to start this week in Norway with some big games, and then we're going to head to Sweden as well. We'll also talk about Malmö against Chelsea and some of the European games we've got this week. But before we do that, I've got a bit of a special guest for you on this show, not just only Meat Man Soccer, but I'm delighted to say we're joined by Shaun Constable, the Constable himself. He is back on this show. We've had him on this show many a times. I think you are now the record appearance holder on this podcast, outside me and Steve. Shaun, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm very well, guys. Thanks as always for having me on the podcast. You're now getting quite a few episodes now, aren't we? Quite deep into it.
Yeah, you are basically we've basically charted our whole podcast through your career.
Yeah.
For those listeners who maybe aren't aware or don't know you, Shaun is a good friend of the podcast. He is currently out in Norway, in fact, based out there, and has just had a stint in charge of Moss FK, which we'll talk about at some point in this show. Previously, Shaun has been at Sandefjord as assistant coach. He's been at Östersunds. He's been at Bromma as well, head coach. If you go back through our archives, we've had interviews with him at every single point during that period. And you got a bit of free time at the moment, Shaun, so you decided to come on and sort of join us. Basically, it's going to be a kind of a three-way this show and discuss all the action with us.
Yeah, sounds good.
Good stuff, man. And how have you been since? Just to give a bit of background before we get into the show, your most recent role was Moss FK. You recently left that role. How was everything? You know, how briefly before we sort of delve into it later. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's nice to have a bit of free time, and I'm coming back to the UK next week, which, you know, with coronavirus and everything else that's gone on, I haven't been able to see my family and my daughter. It's been 20 months. It's been a long time, you know. So I'm actually enjoying having a little bit of time off, reflecting on things, you know, see where the future takes me.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And you get to see your family, and you get to see the Nordic football family as well in this show. So you can spend the next hour with us, maybe chatting and
perfect,
you know, looking into the recent action that's been on the pitch. So
perfect.
Let's get into it. We're going to start in Norway, as we've said. So yeah, I mean, on the last show we talked about the midweek round and the massive game that was going to take place between Bodø, Glimt and Molde. We said, Steve, that it was going to be pretty much a title decider, and you know, it was. Would you say a shocking result? To be honest, you know, it was a big game. I'll let you set the scene and tell us what the result was and what happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to be on my A game tonight, aren't I? With Shaun in the house. Do you know what, Jonathan? I got this match a little bit wrong. My prediction was obviously Molde to edge this game, and I gave my reasons beforehand. The actual outcome, Bodø Glimt went to the AIK Stadium and won 2-0. Just the second team to go there and get 3 points this season. I mentioned before Molde's home record, magnificent home record. It's such a tough place to go to in Norway, and basically Bodø Glimt have produced a performance, top draw performance. You know, short-handed in midfield without Patrick Berg and Ulrich Soltnes, and you know they've outplayed Molde on their own backyard slightly. You know, it wasn't like sort of Man United, Liverpool, where you know, it was complete domination or anything. But they went there to their biggest rivals, their own backyard, and did a job on them. Basically, for me, they controlled the game better. The tactics were better. Their possession of the ball, they used it better than what Molde did, and they took the chances when they needed to. It was as if the players, they just raised their game in a big match situation. Got the 3 points, just give them a 4-point gap, and then results at the weekend. You know, it's no point in beating Molde 2-0 away and then not beating Sandefjord, but they just got the job done there 1-0. And Molde have completely had a horrible game. They lost 6-0 at Godset. So suddenly the title's looking swimmingly, but it was all set up by this fantastic win in Molde, 2-0.
Yeah, I'm going to start by reading the results as well before we get too deep into it. And Shaun, you'll have to tell me, you'll have to tell us if you've caught any of these games, but if not, we could definitely ask you from a manager's point of view as well. I'm going to just read out the results because we had 2 rounds. So midweek round in Norway went as follows. Wednesday, 27th of October, Haugesund 0, Rosenborg 0, Lillestrøm 3, Stabæk 0, Mjøndalen 5, Christiansen, my boys Christiansen 0. I actually caught some of that game. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and had to turn it off. I was
some great goals in that game, by the way.
I was really sad, so I turned it off. Sandefjord 2, Strømsgodset 0, Tromsø 2, Odd 0, Molde, as you mentioned there, 0, Bodø Glimt 2 in that big title sort of playoff, you could say. Then on the Thursday, Brann 0, Viking 2, and Sarpsborg 2, Vålerenga 1. Then in the game's just gone, on Saturday, 30th of October, Christiansen bounced back with a 1-0 draw against Tromsø. Rosenborg losing at home to Lillestrøm 3-1, which is a big result.
Yeah.
Bodø Glimt 1, Sandefjord 0. Odd 2, Mjøndalen 2. Stabæk 2, Haugesund 1. A massive result here that we'll talk about as well. Strømsgodset 6, Molde 0. That is just unbelievable. Viking 1, Sarpsborg 2, and then Vålerenga 1, Brann 0. So yeah, a huge round of games. I've just checked my fantasy team. I can't believe what I'm seeing there either. I got -5.
-5.
I've actually got 20 points for a whole round. I don't know what has happened here. Bjornbæk, I think, did he get sent off? We conceded six goals, I guess.
Yeah,
that is a nightmare in itself. But I mean, Shaun, just tell us. You're out. Someone who's been managing in Norway for the last sort of best part of the season. Do you keep much of an eye on the Eliteserien as a manager, or is it hard to keep track when you're sort of in your own world, if you know what I mean? And do you sort of look at the games for references, maybe scout the leagues, or how much interaction do you get to have when you're in work, and obviously now when you've got a bit more free time?
Yeah, to be honest with you, definitely. I mean, I haven't watched as much football as I did when I was actually working. I watched more when I was working. Or even the OBOS. Look at the OBOS as well, because there's if you're in, like when I was in Post Nord, you look at players that are maybe not playing so much in OBOS to be able to attract them to your level. But of course, I kept an eye on some of the results that are going now, especially like it's the business end of the season, both in Sweden and Norway right now. And I mean, let's face it, both leagues are showing unbelievable title races and relegation battles. It's scary. But for I watched some of the game with Molde, and I've got to be honest with you, they had a chance early in the game, but after that, their defending was atrocious. They were all over the place. Just being allowed to Strømsgodset had just been allowed to run through the middle of them. I mean, it was really I know they're a little bit more offensive, Molde, but that was uncharacteristic for them to be done like that. And as soon as they're descending off, that was the end of them, So, and I watched the Sandefjord game because I still watch. Obviously, not being funny. I think 5-6 of the players starting or being involved in the game on Saturday, I coached them from when they were kids, so I know quite a lot of the players in Sandefjord. And to be honest with you, Bodø Glimt were a little bit lucky in that game. Sandefjord, it could have easily been 3-3, 4-4 that game. If you watch it, there's some big chances on both sides. So. But they just seem to get the job done at the moment, Bodø Glimt, aren't they? They're a little bit like a machine for me. And like Steve said, the game away at Molde was impressive. And I think you hit the nail on the head by describing that they controlled the game much better. They better in deciding when to go forward and when just to keep the ball, if you know what I mean. So yeah, impressive.
Before I'll ask you another question on that in a minute, but just out of interest, which players did you coach at Sandefjord, or is there any that you've seen go on now that you're quite
Sundon Murenfoss, obviously he's gone from centre half to right back at the moment. I think he is. I'm not really sure what the system they're playing, but also Christopher Norman Hansen is in there. Andre Sutherland, who I always nicknamed him Sudsy because I could never shout that onto the pitch. It was a complicated name for me. And some of the other younger players that played more during the early part of the season, I've coached all of those guys. William Kirkovic. I mean, I started coaching William and those guys when they were like 15, 16 years of age. So, yeah, it's been a long time. So.
Yeah, I mean, you were, when we started this podcast, as I mentioned, we first got you on when you were, I think, assistant to, was it Ian Birchin, I believe? Am I right in saying?
No. I was the assistant to Lars Bohinen.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry,
and then
apologies.
Ian Birchnell was in Östersund.
That's right. Yeah, sorry. You were, at Sandefjord assistant manager. Just for those who might not know, and then you've had 2 head coaches roles since then. At Bromma Poikina, you can actually go in our archives and you can listen to that interview. I came over to Sweden as well and watched some of your coaching sessions and kind of had a look around, and then a head role, coaching role at Moss as well, which is in the 3rd tier. Am I right in saying in Norway?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
When we look at this big game, Bodø Glimt Molde, you've had big games when you're from a Poikina, you've had big games when you're at Moss, for example, when you're preparing massive games like that. What would, Till Knutsen, for example, at Bodø Glimt, or what would the manager at Molde, how would they look at that sort of massive game? Is it kind of, how do you think they would have approached it going into the match?
I think those people, the level of experience that they have, they try to play it down from being a big game. I think they make sure that they do everything exactly the same in terms of preparation as they would for any game. And I think in some ways, I think it's important to take the sting out of it a little bit, if you understand what I mean, to try and almost take the importance of the game a little bit out. You have to understand it's a big game. Of course, the players, they don't need to be told that. They know that. And I think it's just making sure that you're meticulous with the details. How are they with set pieces? Obviously those 2 teams know each other really, really well. So it's about maybe having a slight little tweak here and a slight little tweak there to wrestle the advantage in the game. I think that's the number one part of it. Maybe Bodø Glimt decided, okay, we're not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with them in moments, so we're going to try and control the game as much as we can, and I think they were very successful at that.
And how do you do that, Shaun? How do you sort of keep the how do you keep the players calm? How do you make sure that they keep their feet on the ground? Because when we talked about it with Steve last week, we mentioned the kind of, the club website was offering sort of 2 for 1 and pizzas and beers and building up. And, Molde, for example, they were tweeting about the game with massive videos of their players sort of saying, come for the big game, get your tickets. And, they had videos of all the players, the managers and everything. So how do you sort of deal with that when at the same time the club is trying to big it up, if you know what I mean, because given it's such a big game? What do you do on the training ground to sort of keep players focused?
Consistency. Just keep everything consistent and don't go off and start doing things that are like a little bit crazy. All that outside of the PR stuff, we know that clubs, players, they have to do that kind of thing. But I think it's important that when you're talking about top professionals at Norwegian level, and getting the players in and training and saying, hey, now we're at work, now we focus, now we do the things correctly, and we work hard on our game plan. I think it's in many ways it is easier to work with those level of players because their level of professionalism is much, much higher. Simple as that for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And just coming back to you, Steve, just looking at the Molde Bodø Glimt game, I mean, it looked like Bodø Glimt in a 4-3-3, Molde 4-2-3-1. According to Wirescout, just read some of the stats. It was kind of a Molde XG 1.35, Bodø Glimt 0.98, but a 2-0 win. So, you could say Molde maybe did have some chances. 53% possession for Molde, 46.8 for Bodø Glimt. At the end of the day, obviously, who scores the goals wins the game, but was it maybe closer than you thought, or was it? I mean, I think you tweeted saying it was a really professional performance. And from your point of view now, with that 6-0 defeat, is that the title done now? Because it's a 7-point gap now with 5 games to go, 15 points available. Bodø Glimt now have taken a real edge, haven't they?
Yeah, I think it's one of them. You look at XG. XG can give good insight into games, but it's one of those that I would say it's a game you've got to watch to actually understand it. And it's one of those, perhaps the XG stats don't tell the true story because Bodø Glimt were the better team. They just were the better team. And it's sort of both boxes is where they edged it. All right, Molde, crucial times in the game. Molde didn't take their chance. Bodø Glimt took theirs. They had a control on the game. And, with XG, I think there was one massive chance that Molde had and they missed it. That was probably a large proportion of that XG. Take that out and, it's probably down there in the 0.7s. look, it could have ended a draw on another day. Of course it could. But a lot of people were expecting. Remember, Molde were actually odds-on favourites to win this game. You know, they were expected to win it. But it's been a really interesting tussle between these two managers. Two managers I rate highly. I saw some tweets saying Erling Moe, should he be a candidate to be sacked if he doesn't win the league this year? And I've defended this manager many a time on the podcast because I do rate him highly. They've met each other 6 times in the last three seasons, and they've both had 3 wins each, and they've both had great moments where they've sort of outcoached the other. Earlier in the season, Erling Moe got one over Kjetil, and in this particular instance, I think Knudsen just edged him. It's been a good tactical battle. There's been a good rivalry between the two sides. It's not too much like hate or animosity in there. A good, healthy rivalry for Norwegian football, indeed. So,
sorry, so just briefly interrupt. I do apologise, but they're both great guys as well. When you meet them, yeah, gentlemen. You know,
exactly. It's not
competitive as hell, but gentlemen. Yeah.
Yeah, there's there's some stuff said in the media, but not anything ridiculous at that level. I say good, healthy rivalry. It seems like from Molde's point of view, it's a disappointment for them that they've not gone and beat Godset at the weekend. They should have gone 1-0 up. And I tell you now, this was a terrible decision by the linesman.
Yeah, it was
I'm all for an offside, a tight one getting it wrong. There's nothing you can do about that. This is such an obvious decision that should have been a goal. The ball was. The player's miles behind the ball.
Yeah.
And if that goes 1-0 Molde, it could be a different game because Godset have been struggling. The problem with Godset, and this happened against Sarpsborg as well, they beat them 5-0. But whilst it was 0-0, Sarpsborg probably could have scored twice themselves. And if Godset get into a rhythm, they are, Fred Friday, happy days for him. Friday, he just went riot, and then Molde kind of lost their heads. Then you got the midweek game in your mind. And it's 7-point gap, Jonathan, you said. They've actually not got that many easy games left, Bodø Glimt, but they only need 9 official points to win the league. So for me, it's probably done now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I caught the Godset Molde game, actually. Some of that I wanted to tune in for that, and it was like you say. That goal really did change things, didn't it? And then once that was scored, Friday, Hover, Stengel, Gulliksen, Tokstad, and Gulliksen with another one. The goals, they kind of blew them away. Really, the first goal was in the 35th minute, and by half time they were 3-0 up, and then they had another sort of salvo in the last 15 minutes. They got 2 goals from the 90th minute. That's an incredible collapse, really. What exactly happened there with Molde? Was it just lack of concentration? You say that they kind of were a bit unlucky, but that is one almighty collapse for a team going for the title.
Defensive shape was gone. When you're 3-0 down the match, I'm sure Shaun will say this, you've got to take more risks, haven't you? The red card was a last man foul. If he hadn't made the foul, it probably goes 4-0 anyway. But Godset are a funny side. Marienlyst Stadium is a very difficult place to go. The crowd really get behind them. It can become a bit of a maniac atmosphere. They can get on top of you, and that's what happened. They're not the sort. If they're confident, they're up for it. They want to rack up the score. They're not the sort of side that's going to hold on and win 1-0 or something. And it's just one of those games. Molde were not as bad as a 6-0 suggests, but they just kind of lost their defensive shape, and that can happen in a match. It can happen to anyone, Shame for them that it's probably ended a really close title battle, but is the way it is. It's difficult when you're behind, isn't it, Shaun? Like that.
No, 100%. It's a nightmare when you've had a few of those situations this season, to be honest with you. But it's never easy. And, you go in at half time and you talk about, okay, now, we don't want to lose this game 4-5, 6-0. We want to consolidate and be a little bit tight. But with Molde being in the situation they're in, I don't think they wanted to do that. So consequently, by then going for it a little bit to get themselves back into the game, they left themselves ridiculously open at the back, and obviously as soon as the sending off happened, that was it. C'est la vie.
C'est la vie indeed, and it means that Glimt have not lost a game in the league since June. 30th of June away to Sandefjord Euro Club, Shaun, was the last in the league. And then of course they lost to Molde as well. Those are their only, and Odd as well. There's their 3 defeats this season. Their remaining 5 games: Haugesund away. Then we've got the international break. Then they've got Lillestrøm at home, Rosenborg away, Brann at home, and Mjøndalen away. They need 9 points, as you've mentioned there, Steve.
Shaun, not easy games though, I'll tell you.
Yeah, in your opinion, is the league done, Shaun? title?
I wouldn't say it's completely done yet. I to be honest with you, I think the Haugesund game is massive. Honestly, I think if they nail that one, because that's a difficult one, and they play on Thursday, don't they, against Roma away? So I tell you what, the European thing can catch up a little bit. So, and like you say, they've had a knock again. They've had a couple of knocks now, and yeah, it'd be interesting still to see what happens. I think there's still a lot of football to be played.
Yeah, one thing's for sure, Molde are going to need to really, well, pretty much win
every game.
You could say win every game now, couldn't you?
Yeah. But they are capable of doing it, though.
Just looking at their running as well. They've got Sandefjord at home, Rosenborg at home, Brann away, Lillestrøm at home, Haugesund away. So really those Sandefjord, Rosenborg games and Brann away, they've got to sort of win the next 3 games minimum to give them a chance. Yeah. So, it's interesting stuff. We'll move on now to the European games because Glimt are going to be in action again. Before we do that, Shaun, what was your thoughts on that 6-1 destruction of Jose Mourinho in that Glimt game?
Mate, I didn't watch the game because I was a bit like, Roma will go there, stifle the game, win 1-0, typical Jose. And then someone texted me, a friend of mine, have you seen the scoreline? No? And then he just put in a 6-1. I was like, what? You're joking me. I have a word. I don't know when I watched the highlights. It was just like, they scored some. They were a little bit like what you said about Strømsgodset. They just went at them, and when everything they touched went in. There were some fantastic goals. I think they just absolutely shell shocked them. But you could see all the Italians were on the sideline, with their hats on and big coats, and it was pretty hostile up there, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Let's face it. So they weren't used to that, and I think they totally underestimated them and got a spanking. And that's why I think Jose will not make that same mistake on Thursday. I think he'll play a much stronger team at home, so it could be a very, very difficult night for Bodø Glimt.
Yeah, of course, Roma against Glimt at the Stadio Olimpico, Europa Conference League. It's a game that, if you look at the groups, Glimt are currently top. So, it's Glimt top, Roma second, Zorya third, and CSKA Sofia at bottom of the group. 3 games left to go. Is it 2 qualifying this, Steve? And what's your thoughts on this game coming up? Because you did not fancy them in the first leg. Do you give them a hope in this one now, or what's your thoughts?
I would be surprised because I think in terms of the group, the match now probably means more to Roma than it does Bodø Glimt. Bodø Glimt are now probably thinking about Haugesund away, which Shaun mentioned there. That's a banana skin game at the weekend. They'll be thinking about that match, and they've had a great start to this Conference League, but they still have matches against Zorya and CSKA Sofia. Sofia, is it Sofia? I don't know how you pronounce that. I would never do. But they've only got 1 point. Zorya have got 3. And, they've got at least 1 home match against one of them 2 teams. So is this like a free hit for Glimt now? No pressure on them. They're going to have a bit of fun. But I think they need to come out of that match unscathed with no injuries, things like that. Look, Mourinho's not going to get embarrassed again, is he? So he will field a stronger team. Whether it's his very strongest 11, I don't know, but there's no way he's going to allow himself to be embarrassed again. Mourinho would probably like to do a job on Bodø Glimt if he could, but it'll probably just be, he's not stupid either. He's not a rack up the score sort of manager, is he? Very often, so I think I could see it being sort of like a 2 or 3-0 to Roma, really.
It'd be interesting to see how Bodø Glimt approach it. Like you said, I'm interested if they decide to drop into a compact 4-5-1 and actually play counter-attacking football, which is something they can do unbelievable. They still have a lot of speed, I'm going to watch that. It'll be an interesting game, really.
Yeah, first place goes through, and second place goes to what I'm seeing here described as a preliminary knockout round. Steve, really? Any light on that?
With the third place teams from the main Europa League, which is that I hate that, but
so the third place teams in the Europa League play
second place teams from Conference League,
for what, a place in the next round of the Conference League?
Yeah, if you win your Conference League group and you get a bye in the first knockout round.
Okay.
So if you win the group, you go through automatically to the next round. And if you come second, you play a third place team in the Europa League to go through to the next round of the Conference League.
Yeah, you either play a third place team from the main Europa League or another team that finishes second in Conference League. As usual, UEFA make it quite complicated. But look, just getting the top two, all right? Just finishing the top two, and take it across the bridge. You might win the group.
Yeah.
You've got to win matches basically from that point onwards anyway, haven't you?
Yeah,
I've got to say that is a very convoluted way of having it, but fair enough. It gives teams who couldn't even make it out of the Europa League group another chance to continue getting the revenue, I suppose. We talked about the absolute battering on the last podcast, so go back and listen to that if you wanted to get some more insight into the great work from Kjetil Knutsen and Bodø Glimt. So we'll just quickly sort of ask you for predictions in this game. Shaun, you want to go first? What's your prediction, maybe?
I'm gonna just go for 2-1 Bodø Glimt.
In the Stadio Olimpico?
Yeah, I'm going for it.
Big. And Steve?
Well, I'll say 2-0 to Roma for this one.
2-0 to Roma. I'm gonna stick my neck on the line as well. I'm gonna say 2-2 draw. So
one of us is going to be right.
One of us is going to be right in some way, at least. But it's been interesting to see a bit of a reaction from Jose Mourinho, just for those who might be interested. He's not been happy at all. He's actually ostracized quite a few of the players who played in that 6-1 game. He made some of them not even train with the squad after their battering, because obviously he did play quite a few fringe players. I think the agent of one of the players, Amadou Diarra, came out and said it's an uncomfortable situation after his player was basically taken out of the Roma squad completely, along with some other players, Borja Mayoral, Gonzalo Villar and Brian Reynolds. They were both dropped from his squad for the next 2 games. So Jose Mourinho up to his old tricks, basically throwing them under the bus in a way. It'd be interesting to see if he can get a reaction out of them and see how things go. His agent Daniele Pieriano described Mourinho's. He said that his player had been made a scapegoat. Is he making a horrible price for the error, or is Mourinho trying to sell him? I think it is an uncomfortable situation. So clearly there's obviously a bit of beef there going on at Roma. So you never know. Glimt might be able to take advantage of that.
But Jose Mourinho, he almost uses that game to sort of put people out. If they have a bad game, it's like, perfect, now I can push him away. That's how he sets it up. He does it on purpose. And just on a further note, their most recent game they lost at home against AC Milan in the game just gone in Serie A. So maybe a little bit of pressure there for AS Roma that Glimt can take advantage of. Yeah. Let's move on to the next talking point, which is Viking Rosenborg. Now there's a bit of a battle here for third place in Norway coming on. My boys Christiansen have not had a great run of it. They were third for quite some time. They're now down to 6th. There's 4 points between 6th and 3rd. It's now occupied by Viking after their results. Steve, tell us what's been going on with Viking and Rosenborg just quickly.
Viking have been good form. They've won something like 4 or 5 games in a row, and they should have beat Sarpsborg, to be honest. They just missed a lot of chances in the game, and they might look at that and they've really let a good chance slip. If they won that game, they'd be level on points with Molde. Rosenborg are a weird side. They had a great run sort of the back end of the summer, and now they've only won one of the last 5 games. The one game I didn't see, Rosenborg Lillestrøm. I was otherwise engaged on Saturday evening. I'd not seen this game, so that's the first win Lillestrøm have had at the Lerkendal Stadium in about 15 or 20 years, I do believe. So a stunning outcome there. It's not good enough for Rosenborg as a club, is it? If they don't finish in a medal position, it's just not good enough. I'm sorry. With their resources, it would be unacceptable. Look, it's one of 3 for me that get the bronze medal: Viking, Rosenborg, or Lillestrøm. Toss a 3-way coin because all 3 clubs have shown signs of dropping points recently. I'd like to see Viking get 3rd place. I think they played some nice eye-catching football this year, but it's tough to call.
Yeah, goals from Hovland and then Matthew, Lennart Olsen and Pettersson turned the game around for Lillestrøm. I mean, I don't know if anyone actually caught this game, but it looked like half the stadium's on fire with there's some flares in the away end, is it? From Lillestrøm fans. It looked like the actual stadium was on fire.
The way it looked. Lillestrøm fans can be a bit tasty, to be fair.
Yeah, it looks really lively in that ground when they took when Rosenborg took the lead anyway. But yeah, nice goal from Matthew, then Lennart Olsen, and then a late goal, 85th minute from Pettersson. Shaun, I wanted to ask you. Obviously, you're living in Norway and coaching, and you've coached in Norway, you've been a head coach. Rosenborg haven't had the best of times in the last few years.
No.
We know in England how seriously we take our football, and for example, if a team like, if a top team like Manchester United or Liverpool isn't doing well, it's like a big story, and it's all you hear about in the news type thing, sports pages, back pages, that kind of thing. What's it like with Rosenborg? I mean, is it kind of something that's talked about, or is it kind of
yeah, it's the same,
especially within football circles? What do they make of this in Norway in terms of their run over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's been my personal view of it, and I certainly don't know the politics and the details of what goes on in Rosenborg Football Club, but I think if you go all the way back to when they had this kerfuffle with Kåre in the Brixen, it was not a nice ending to that situation. And then from there onwards, I think their recruitment policy has been haphazard. I don't think it's done with enough structure, in my personal view. I'm not sure that they found the right manager, the right fit. I think they made a definite few mistakes in that scenario afterwards. And they are a massive club. I mean, they're huge in Norway. They're the biggest club. There's no doubt about that. I know Molde now and Bodø Glimt are coming, but historically we know how big they are. So it is big news. And if you've seen their squad, I mean, they've had a few injuries, to be fair to them, but still they should be doing much, much better than what they are. They have to be challenging for a medal. So at the moment, for me, it depends what team turns up. One day they turn up and they look fantastic, and then 3-4 days later they turn up and you think like it's like Keystone Cops are all over the place. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and if anyone hasn't seen the highlights of that game, you may be able to catch them on YouTube. I mean, the Lillestrøm fans go absolutely crazy when they score. And I wanted to ask you one question as well before we move on from that. Shaun, I think you've actually coached one of their players at Östersunds, am I right? Is that
Tom Pettersson?
He scored a lovely goal towards the end of the game. Just wanted to get your thoughts on him.
Cracking player, absolutely fantastic lad. Good lad. He was the captain in Östersund. He wasn't the captain that was verbal or anything like that. He was more how he performed on the pitch. He was that type of captain. He wasn't loud or anything like that, but his professionalism and how he worked and his mentality it said everything about him. A very cultured player, tall, left-footed, lovely left foot on him. Really, really good at playing in between the lines. Really good, can hit passes along the floor into the opposite pockets, wingers coming inside and stuff like that. So. And he's been known to pop up and score quite a few goals in his time. Good lad. And his wife, fantastic football player, played 32 times or so for Sweden and coaches the Swedish national under-17s women's team. So it's a football family.
There you go. That's the insight that you cannot get anywhere except the Nordic Football Podcast. And great bit of knowledge there. Pettersson scored from a set piece, and also Lennart Olsen from a set piece. So Rosenborg clearly dealing with having trouble with set pieces. Pettersson was he left Östersunds for Cincinnati, and then has turned up at Lillestrøm. So good to see him doing well. He's 31 now, but good to see him getting the most out of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. And his wife was also on the coaching staff in Östersund with Ian.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah,
yeah. She's like it's a bit like you, mate. She's got a brain as big as a planet when it comes to names of players and really detailed. Really detailed she was.
Fantastic stuff. Good to hear it. And Najir, thanks for that. And yeah, we're going to move on to the relegation battle now before we end part one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first place to start, I guess, is Mjøndalen, really, isn't it? Steve, tell us what's been going on there, because they've had up and downs, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know what? We talked about the 7-0 loss at Haugesund, didn't we? And I did say that they will not make any rash decisions and that Vegard Hansen will be given certainly till the end of the season. He decides when he leaves that club. He's part of the furniture. I've got to give it to I don't know how he keeps their spirits up. I mean, they have. It was the same last year. I think they had a terrible run of results at one point. They come back and they're beating Kristiansand 5-0, and no one in their right mind could have predicted this. I did not see this coming. The only thing I'll say is Christiansen do struggle as a favourite. They just don't seem to. They're not very good with that dynamic. It was the same against Tromsø as well. Although quite why they were the favourite in that game, I had no idea. But look, Mjøndalen have given themselves a chance. They've not only beaten Christiansen 5-0, they were 2-0 down against Odd the weekend with literally 10 minutes left, 15 minutes left. And they've been outplayed. Odd outplayed them. But they've somehow got the mental resolve to keep going, keep fighting. And they get a couple of goals in the space of 2 minutes, one of which was an unbelievable hit from Larsen. And they've got themselves a point out of nowhere. And look, it looks at the minute 2 from 3 will be going down. Stabæk had a great win as well. I mean, I thought, Sandefjord might get sucked into it. I certainly thought Sarpsborg might. And we'll have a quick talk about them in a minute, the recent resurgence they've had. But it now does look like 2 from 3. And look, Mjøndalen are an unbelievable fighting team, Jonathan. And somehow, I think a lot of people want to see them go down. And just because of the style they play. But you cannot knock their fighting spirit and incredible desire just to get as many points as they can.
Yeah, I mean, they're still bottom of the table, but they've given themselves, like you say, they're now 10 points away from safety with 5 games to go, but 2 points away from the relegation playoff, which could be a lifeline for them. Sandefjord are the team that's in the, just outside it in 13th place on 29 points. Then there's an 8-point gap to 14th. So Stabæk, Brann and Mjøndalen are really up against it now to sort of escape relegation. Brann still in that bottom 2 as well, and Stabæk are in that relegation playoff in 14th. Shaun, you've been at clubs like Sandefjord, for example, where you're sort of fighting relegation. How do you motivate the players, keep them grounded? What tidbits have you learned as a manager when you're in that situation? What's it like dealing with it?
It's not easy. But I mean, if you're talking about Mjøndalen, they've developed this. If you want, I know it's a bit a bit random, but it's a little bit like that Alex Ferguson mentality of like, everybody's against us, everybody hates us, no one likes us, and that's what they do at Mjøndalen, and it galvanizes them. They just have this unique. The coach there, he's a character. And I know a few of the players down there as well, and their characters as well, and they have this, like you say, they don't give up. They probably every time they're in the Eliteserien, it's like it's just like this is brilliant for us. This is amazing, and that's why I think when they have the run of bad results, they take it better than a lot of other clubs. But it's not easy to keep the players focused. And again, I go back to when you're at the top of the league, you've got to just be consistent. Don't do anything crazy. Sometimes maybe give them an extra day off. Maybe you need to go out together to a restaurant and have some dinner. So those kind of things help you if that's how you want to do it yourself. But, if you think about Mjøndalen now, Stabæk have a mentality of like they're fighting this kind of a little bit similar. And they've had a turbulent season. The pressure's on Brann. Brann have all the pressure. They went out and spent a little bit of money, brought in, recruited really well, but they, if you see the game against Vålerenga, they were a little bit unlucky in that game as well. So it's tough. I think they're the ones under the most pressure right now.
Yeah, when you we got Mjøndalen's running, by the way. They got Viking next, then they got Strømsgodset away, Sarpsborg at home, Vålerenga away, Glimt at home. So that is a really tough run for them.
Yeah.
You mentioned sort of go out for dinner or try and change the morale. Do you get players like coming to you complaining? Like how when it kind of hits the fan, like how bad does it get compared to sort of like pre-season or normal times? Is it really random things happening, or does it depend on the characters you have? How do you galvanize and deal with the individual people around the club?
100%. It's about the people you have inside the club and where you're at. I mean, we went. I was with Lars when we went up in 2014, and we came down with a big bang the following season. And we knew it was going to be difficult, and we got to a point where we were like, okay, listen, this is where we are, guys. We're going to fight through it as best as we can. And we realised we weren't good enough at that time. But when we went down, we re-galvanised ourselves and came straight back up again. And I think teams like Mjøndalen, I think they already have got that acceptance about them. Of course, they don't want to go down. But if they do, it's not the end of the world for them. Financially, they still manage to cope and keep a good level and get themselves back again. So it is about the characters that you have in the group. And of course, if players are not playing, they will always come and complain to you. and complain, or at least ask questions. Why am I not playing? Blah blah. And especially if you're losing games, it makes even more sense for a player to come in who's not playing. So for me, it's always been, no matter what level you're at, I think you have to be honest. You have to be honest to your players and tell them this is how you see things, and they have to accept that. And remember that it's important that players take responsibility for themselves and their own actions as well. So that's an important factor for me.
I've got a question for you, Shaun.
Yes.
It's about one of your one of the guys that used to work with Lars Behinen, because we've mentioned on this show in the last few weeks, what sides could get sucked into trouble potentially, and I honestly thought Sarpsborg were a candidate for it, and I certainly thought that when they announced that he would not be the manager next year, that he was end of the contract, that's it. Incredibly, they've responded with 3 fantastic wins. 3-1 at Kristiansand, which is a tough place to go. Really? Great win against Vålerenga, and they've gone to Viken and won 2-1. They played some very, very good football. And knowing Lars, how would he sort of prepare the players to keep them motivated when they know that they're not going to be playing under him next year? How would he have dealt with that situation? How would you think he's got the performance is so good?
I think the only way you do that is that actually you have the players have trust in you. So that's number one for me. You can see the players, you can see the amount of running and effort they put in. It shows you that they're fully invested in what he's doing, regardless of if the club make their own decision about what they want to do. I'm the same as you. I think it seems crazy to me. I don't understand why you would make that statement and be that way, because it could have gone the other way, couldn't it? Well, it still can. Don't get me wrong. But I think they're a little bit enough out of it to be able to get dragged in. But I think at the end of the day, I know Lars really well, and I know that for him it's about pride as well. Pride in your job. You're a professional football player. You get paid pretty good money for doing an amazing job. And that's don't one of the motivations about how I would see it is that don't be part of a squad that goes down. Take pride in your job and make sure that you do things correctly. And let's face it, professional football players, they're playing for their futures. Are they playing for the future in that club, or are they playing for their future in another club? Because that's what it's about. I think, like, my personal view a little bit, I don't know all the politics that goes on in Sarpsborg, but it seems that they kind of lost their way a little bit at the moment, recruitment wise, and maybe a bit unsure about what kind of manager they want in, what direction they're going in. So it'll be very, very interesting to see who they appoint and where they go at the end of the season, to be honest with you.
Yeah. The way I see it, I think Lars would, if he does end up leaving, which looks like it, he goes with his head held high now.
Absolutely.
They could feasibly finish as high as 8th, even 7th at a push.
Yeah.
He would leave with a good rep in place, and highly employable still. And they would, you're right. I think they need to make a decision about what direction they went in. I actually think they had a bit of a break losing Mikkel Starr at that time, because I think it was just going a bit stale for him there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see. Just before we finish this section, which 2 teams do you think will go automatically?
I think Mjøndalen will go down. I think when Jonathan named the games that they've got left, they're very, very difficult for them to recover, I think, personally. And I'm going to flip a coin between Brann and Stabæk. The one, I don't know, Stabæk, the young coach that's come in there has done an amazing job, and I know a couple of players, and they've really bought into the boy. They've really bought into his methods and how he's working. He's rejuvenated that squad, and I watched them away. Sandefjord played Stabæk away, and I watched that game, and Stabæk were awful. Absolutely shocking. They didn't look like they had any idea. Now they look like they've got an idea of what they're doing. So I don't know. There's more pressure on Brann, isn't there? As a club as big as they are, and they spent money to bring certain players in, quality players as well. There's much more pressure on them. Whereas I think Stabæk are just going in there and they're a little bit like a boxer that's been hurt a little bit. They're just swinging and hoping that they connect with something. Do you know what I mean? So. Yeah.
I worry for Brann. And I've seen it happen before with my own eyes. I've seen this club get relegated. They come back from it well, and they would come back from it again. But one thing I would say is I'm pretty sure whoever finishes third bottom will stay up, because the playoff system is very much favoured in sort of Eliteserien clubs.
Yeah,
favour with in preparation and things like that. And I don't know enough about the teams. You'll probably know more than me.
Yeah,
I can't imagine a team like Jerv or someone beating like a Brann or even like a Starbek, to be honest. Fredrikstad maybe with support, but they seem to have drifted off form. It looks like Hamkam, by the way, they're literally all but up mathematically.
Yeah.
What a great name for a club. It looks like Ålesund probably will be in the box seat for second place as well. But
I think so now.
And Brann, sorry to come in there. Brann has the final games in their running. They've got Rosenborg next at home, which is a massive game. Then they got to go to Sandefjord away, Bodø Glimt away, and then Sarpsborg at home. So a massive run in for Brann. I mean, before that game, they'd actually gone 6 unbeaten before these last 2 defeats. But these 2 defeats really look like they could be potentially fatal for their Eliteserien survival chances. We're going to move on because we've overrun a little bit in the Norway section. But before we do you know? Do you happen to have any exclusive as someone who knows Lars Bohinen quite well? Do you happen to know where he might be off to, Shaun, at all? Have you had any conversations with him?
No, absolutely no, not nothing like that. Because he's just focusing on the job he's got now, and of course, exactly like what Steve said, he wants to walk away there with his head held high and say, "Hey, listen, I did a good job. I did what I was brought in to do," and so far it seems that's what he's doing. So I think he'll approach that later on when the season's finished. And I think personally, if you look into Eliteserien clubs next season and definitely Åbosch clubs, I don't think he's going to have too much problems getting a job.
Fantastic stuff. And as you put Shaun on the spot there, Steve, I'm going to ask you as well. As it stands, which 2 teams do you think are going down automatically?
I think Mjøndalen will go down, and I think Brann are going to join them.
Fair enough. That wraps it up for part 1. Coming up in part 2, we're going to talk a little bit about Shaun's life and times, the life and times of Shaun Constable, the man himself, the legend. And we're also going to talk about Sweden because, again, we've had a midweek round and there's been some games this evening as well, which potentially could swing the title race. So stay tuned, listen to the theme music and get yourself a coffee or whatever you need and join us after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss. I'm with Jonathan Fadugba as always, and we've got a special guest on the show, Shaun Constable. Shaun, I think it's time to talk a little about where your life's been since you were last on the show. You're at Bromma Poikina. Manager points per game, 1.88 average points per game at Bromma Poikina. Wasn't enough for that for the board there, and you were let go. You turn up at Moss FK, a team in the 3rd tier of Norwegian football. Quite a hotbed of football, actually, a footballing region for Norway. There's quite a few clubs there with fierce rivalries in the southeast of Norway. So Moss FK, you're appointed there January 2021. What was it like for you first head coach role in Norwegian football? You must have been a proud man.
Yeah, absolutely, and even more so going to a club with such big traditions as Moss, and they back in the 80s they played against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid in the European Cup. They've been up there at that level. There was their heyday during that period of time. So, a lot of history, but they've had a tough last 15 years or so. Economically, it's been tough for them. And, they've had some ups and downs, but never quite had that step where they could push to get themselves into the Åbosch League. And I think they went down to the 3rd division for a bit and came back up. So, yeah, it was great to get that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we had a player on the show, Amin Askar, who he actually played for Moss back in the day. He also played for Fredrikstad and Sarpsborg. Incredible. He played for all 3 fierce rivals, and we had a great talk that day about sort of it's great area for football.
Yeah,
I mean, you said they've had some tough times. It looks like, look at the results this season, some ups and downs. I've got to talk to you about the cup win you had against Fredrikstad.
Yeah,
in August. I mean, that must be one of the highlights of of your time at Moss?
Yeah, that was cracking, and we to be honest with you, I was really disappointed with them. I thought they would have been. I thought they didn't play very much. They were quite direct, and relying a lot on their front three, who by the way are really decent. And I think they struggled with us with our possession, because it is the kind of football I like to play. So we did really well, and we went 1-0 down, which everybody expected us to then go on and get smashed kind of thing. But we came back really quickly after conceding that goal and get a penalty, and we go 1-1 at half time, and we go in there with, to be honest with you, just absolutely low shoulders. Just said to the guys, you've got nothing. All the pressure is on them guys. You just go out, enjoy yourselves, drop your shoulders down, play with confidence, be brave. And at the end of the day, I make 2 substitutions, and they both come on and both score. So it was one of those moments where everybody's like, "Oh, well done," but a week and a half before that, I made 3 substitutions and we conceded 2 goals. So it's a toss of a coin sometimes, So, but it was a great experience. That was fantastic.
Yeah, Shaun, I wanted to ask you, it's quite funny on this podcast because we have guests and we always keep in touch with them. We try our best to sort of, bring them back on when we can. We've had Rafa Roldan, for example, on twice, who whether you work with.
Top man. He is.
We've had Ian Birchnell on twice, for example. We've had many people through the years. Axel Kjær came on twice. We try and keep in touch with these people, but you're probably the man who's, consistently, I would say if you're charting like your life, then the Nordic podcast is the place to sort of do it, because every single time you've had a juncture in your life, you kind of, I remember when you left Östersunds, for example, and you came on the show, and we had a deep discussion there. So anyone digging into the archives will probably know your whole life story.
Exactly.
I wondered because the Bromma Poikina job, you were very close to getting promoted, and you just missed out. I think it was a penalty shootout, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and in that interview, we talked about their academy and kind of that was your first head coach role, and I really love coming to see you and watching the training sessions, for example, and just seeing how you manage things, your analysis team, stuff like that. I really enjoyed the behind the scenes element to it. And then COVID came along, and I don't think I've been abroad since. But
exactly.
What I wanted to ask you was, what have you learned from Moss that say you didn't know when you left Bromma Poikina, if you know what I mean? Because obviously you're on your evolution as a coach. You left Bromma Poikina, obviously. I'd imagine you were quite disappointed at the time to leave,
absolutely.
Given how things had gone. Just take us back to that point when you left. What did you feel you'd learned taken away from it, and then what do you think you've also learned now from Moss?
Leadership, everything about how you lead, and to be honest with you, the Bromma Poikina job was an amazing job to be at, and when I went to Moss, I probably realised how much I was spoilt at Bromma Poikina in many ways. When you think about the level, even though the 2 levels are kind of equivalent, they're both 3rd level in Sweden and in Norway, but the level of players at Bromma Poikina was much higher. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever about that. And that's not being detrimental to the guys in Moss whatsoever. That's just the facts that Bromma Poikina in that respect are kind of a bigger club, and they had the finances were much higher. So there was, players, as you can see this season, they've done amazing this year, and they spent a little bit of money this year, Bromma Poikina, to make sure they got out of that league where they deserve to be in Superettan. So I think it was my biggest learning being in Moss was to understand the level and to understand the players that you're dealing with and the type of information that you give them on game days and in training and stuff like that. And that was an interesting journey on both accounts. But this time in Moss, it's more about, I learned a lot about language. A little bit, been reading a little bit about Verheyen as well, and he talks about, non-contextual talking to players and non-contextual language. So I find that quite fascinating, and it was a big learning curve for me in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't quite work out for you at Moss, obviously, and you've recently left your role. Was there anything that you kind of now, having been at Moss, like what was the experience like in terms of, you said it was a very different level of players. Was there any other challenges, or especially being a COVID season? I remember you saying at one point you had a long waiting time between the league starting, that kind of thing. Like, if you're doing it again now, was there anything you didn't know at the time that maybe you could take into your next job?
The one thing I would 100% say that there was a period when I should have changed the system, no doubt. But the club are very much focusing on a 4-3-3, and I play 4-3-3 a certain particular way. In hindsight, I should have gone to a 4-2-3-1 much earlier than I did, and it was more like personnel. Should this player play? My gut instinct was there to say do it, and I didn't. And we conceded too many goals, and there was a problem with that because the way I wanted to play, having the number 6s, they need to be mobile, and maybe we didn't quite have that player there at that particular time. Also, I know this might sound a bit, I don't know how the viewers might interpret it, but you need sometimes a little bit of the football gods to be on your side. And we lacked that a few times in the season. And one particular situation was for the striker, Sebastian Pedersen, who's the younger brother of Marcus Pedersen, who you probably both of you know very well. A different character, but fantastic player. And to be honest with you, he's the best striker in the league. And we lost him after 5 games. He scored 5 goals in 5 games, and we lost him for, I think, 5-6 games. He came back, scored 2 goals in 2, and then did his cruciate ligament. And even though it's only one player, it was a huge loss to us. And I can honestly say that he's like he's like a little bit similar to Veton Berisha in Viking. He's an absolute machine, pressing on his own, fantastic player, and a fantastic left foot to score goals. Great in the air, and he's not that big. And so to lose him was a massive thing. And to be honest with you, if he stays in the team, we probably get those extra 5-6 points in mid-table, and everything would have been fine.
Shaun, there's obviously there'll be people listening to this podcast, maybe at certain clubs and stuff. What sort of manager are you now? What is your style? What sort of qualities? What sort of style of football could you bring to a football club out there? Where are we with Shaun Constable? Sort of the philosophies and the sort of tactical identity now.
Wow, how to bring that down into a short conversation? That's going to be difficult. No, at the end of the day, I think you have to be adaptable. I think you have to adapt. You can't. I want to play football. I want to play through the zones or through the lines, whatever you want to call it. But when I'm playing a 4-3-3, I tend to either have my number 6 drop between my 2 centre halves, or I leave the 6 up and the 2 8s drop down either side to create the overload and the build up, and try and play through the lines basically, and get my wingers inside, get my fullbacks high and wide. Very much to be. I'm much more an attacking coach than I am a defensive one. I think ideally, if I have a choice of bringing in an assistant, I'll bring an assistant in that's defensive minded, so we get a little bit of a balance there, which would be a good idea. I would like to score goals. I want my team to score goals, to be adventurous. In terms of what I'm like as a manager, I would say that I'm a manager that believes in talking to my players. I believe that the players should have a role in the game plan, how we're going to play. I like to ask them questions in training sessions. I love a debate. I'm not stressed about players challenging me, because I feel like if a player challenges me over a situation, it's up to me to have the knowledge to be able to put my point across. And sometimes, more than sometimes, a lot of the time, the player says something, they're inside of the game, and you think to yourself, do you know what? That's a great idea. Yeah, we'll do that. And I think it empowers the players. They feel part of the project then, if you include them in decision making as well. And that's kind of who I am. I have an open door policy, and I believe in honesty. How sometimes that is really difficult to do, but I think if you're honest with the players, they respect you for that.
Very, very well said, I must say. Very well said.
Thank you.
Superb that. And, it's interesting, I was just looking at the results. I don't think many under 2.5 goal specialists would have been enjoying betting on your matches at Moss.
No, mate. You never know what's going to happen when we play.
plenty of goals in there, plenty of excitement and entertainment, and there's a lot of people in football who do like that. So very interesting to hear that way.
Pleasure.
Well, you're a well-travelled man, Shaun, and one of your previous clubs, Östersunds, we're going to talk about them in a little bit of detail very soon. But we are going to switch to Allsvenskan talk now, because this is a hell of a title battle that evolves from week to week. Some really crucial results going through. I'm just going to actually go through the weekend results because there were some big ones. Degerfors 0, IFK Gothenburg 1, Halmstad 1, AIK 0. Bit of a surprise down there. Mjällby a 2-0 win against Hammarby. Norrköping 3, Elfsborg 2. Late drama in that game. Red cards as well. Elfsborg, bad result for them. Djurgården get a 1-0 win at Örebro. Häcken 1, Kalmar 4. What has happened to Häcken this season? Sirius 2, Malmö 3. I actually watched this game. Late drama there. And Varberg 3, Östersunds 0. A result which does officially relegate Östersunds. There was a big result from the midweek round as well. It was Malmö 1, AIK 0, and IFK beat Djurgården 3-0. The way the table is now, Malmö are on 51 points, Djurgården 50, Elfsborg 48, and AIK 47. It feels like a pivotal sort of weekend, Jonathan, when two of the pretenders win and two of them lose.
Yeah, and we've also had a midweek round last week. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on that as well, but obviously, the big we previewed that on the last show, and the big result really from that in terms of the title race was Malmö beating AIK 1-0. That was a huge game in the perspective of the title race. I'll just read through some of the other results. I think from that midweek round as well might be of interest. Just some major results. IFK beating Djurgården 3-0 was a huge game as well. And then obviously Degerfors 1, Elfsborg 2. So just from the point of view of the title race, those were some big results as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you look at the weekend just gone, I mean, I think it was the way to describe this week in Allsvenskan was it's Colak time. What time was it? It's Colak time or something like that, because it was the Antonio Colak show. We did actually talk about him last week, didn't we, Steve? And I said he's been off the boil a little bit, and him and Berman Savic had maybe just slightly dipped since my Y Scout blog about them. But they bounced back in style this past 2 game weeks. Malmö, obviously, when they beat AIK, the winner was from a goal from Berman Savic. He managed to flick on a kind of a set piece, and it was actually probably a cross, to be honest, but it just bounced in the line and went in, and that was enough. AIK couldn't get an equalizer, and then this serious game, I mean, brilliant story in this one in terms of the goals. Joe Inge Berget scored a penalty. I know you've never been a massive fan of him, Steve, but he's been in quite good form recently. Then Netabay and Sili Sufai put Sirius 2-1 up after half time. You thought to yourself, what's going on here then? This is a turn up for the books in the title race. Malmö, are they going to blow it? But it was time, as I just said, Colak time. He actually came off the bench. He was benched for this game. Came off the bench, 76th minute and 90th minute winner. And this is what the beauty of football is all about, to be honest. When he scored his winner and he ran into the crowd, went absolutely crazy. The scenes in the away end when he scored were incredible. There's one fan in the ground who I kind of want to get him on the show or something, because he, like that just face of like pure ecstasy when you score a last minute winner. And Colak ran into the crowd and the guy was like just in ecstasy, and they just hugged each other. All the fans crowding around him. It was like one of those moments where the players run into the crowd and that kind of thing. You take your yellow card or whatever. Colak actually got booked, and I think there's a potential he might even miss a game because of that. So he's, it was anyway. There was a bit of a talk after it saying, it's a bit of a joke really that he, players get booked for that kind of pure emotion. But it was a really wonderful moment for Malmö fans, and it's put them. They're now in the in the front seat really for this title race. I think. I'm not going to say that they're definitely going to win it, but I mean, I have been predicting they'll win it. Anders Torstensson also came on the show, the Malmö manager, and said he thinks they'll win it. And I think this was probably, we've got 4 games to go. We've had one more round in Norway, but this was probably the week where I think Malmö may just pull away with it. But as I've said to you before, their next game is IFK away, and that is going to be IFK Göteborg away, and that is a grudge match. So that is going to be a huge game, I think, in this title race. but certainly Malmö have reacted the only way they know, and that is getting wins when it counts.
Yeah, Shaun, this has been a very interesting title battle over in Sweden there. I don't know how close you've been following it. It's been a different sort of title battle to compare to Norway with 4 teams involved.
Yeah.
Do you just think that the extra sort of experience and quality and class of Malmö ultimately will get the job done?
Yeah, I do. I thought there was a period a few weeks back. I thought Djurgården were going to kick on, but they didn't, and they've had a little hiccup. And personally, I think I've in the situation where Malmö were playing obviously they're in the Champions League and stuff like that. It was an advantage for them to take, and I think they've thrown around about 5-6 points personally. So I was a bit surprised that they didn't kick on, and now Malmö, like you say, I think they just make a little bit of their intent, but they've still got quite a few games in the Champions League to play, so it's not easy for them, not easy at all.
The Champions League is definitely a problem. We think, Jonathan's mentioned before how it may well have sort of impacted their season. They've now got a match against Chelsea upcoming, which I mean, as bad as they've been in the group, they cannot ignore this match, can they? In terms of the occasion it is for the supporters. So, are they going to kind of knacker themselves out a bit? Do you think before the IFK game?
Yeah, when is that game? Is it on the Sunday?
It looks like it's on the Sunday. It's 5:30 kickoff time in Sweden.
So, in terms of periodization. For them, it's better that they're in the Champions League rather than being in the Europa League or the Conference League, because that's on a Thursday. So when you're playing Thursday and you've got Friday, Saturday, and then you're playing on the Sunday, that's a massive impact. If they play they play Tuesday, don't they, against Chelsea tomorrow?
Yes.
So then that means they've got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's 4 days of recovery. Then it's not a problem for them, because then, depending on how they work, if they come in the next day or if they have the day off afterwards, or do they have the day off the day after the game, there's different ways that you can do it. But they still get plenty of time to recover. And with a club with the resources of Malmö, I actually don't think it'll affect them as much. I think they're lucky that they're in the Champions League rather than being in the Europa League, like I said, because the Thursday game, that's much harder to deal with.
Jonathan, I'm actually going to ask you a question about a club that we probably haven't talked about as much as we should do recently, and that is AIK. They're now in 4th place. They've lost 3 of the last 4. Have you been disappointed with the title effort that they've put in? I think you did, to be fair, say to you about sort of mid-season, you were like, I don't think they've got the sort of the goals in them to maybe challenge. And I think so far you've been proven right. But have you been disappointed recently in these really big games at a crucial time of the season? Like they lose to Halmstad tonight. That's not good enough, is it, if you want to win the gold medal?
Yeah, this was probably the week where I think the shortcomings of Djurgården and AIK really came to the fore. I think if you look at it, Djurgården have had some poor results in my opinion, and just got a narrow win at Örebro, in fact. So I think that was probably a good game for them to have, because they've been really struggling. Lost 3 of their last 4 games. Got battered by E28, which was a big result really for them, by the way. The fans are really getting on side at E28 now. Things are turning around there. But yeah, they managed to just beat Örebro 1-0 away. Emmanuel Banda scored a goal. And in terms of AIK, yeah, it's not been a great run for them. I never really thought they had some results where, for example, winning Stockholm derbies and that, where they kind of got into this title race. But if you really look at it on balance, this wasn't a season that I don't think anyone really expected AIK to win the league. I think it would have been a bit of a stretch. They've lost 7 out of their 26 games, which is quite a lot, to be honest. They've got a fantastic, best defensive record in the league, but it's always the problem with AIK. They just don't score enough goals. I think Stefanelli, Goitom, they're decent players, but I just think they lack that kind of Cholak, or they're just not quite. They just don't quite have the goals. I caught this game against Halmstad. I caught a bulk of it, and if you actually look at it in the league table, according to Wisecout data, AIK are 7th in the league for expected goals, and Halmstad are 8th in the league. So the 2 teams who are kind of pretty much level in terms of how much you expect them to score. So AIK are way off it compared to the big boys. Their XG 36.59. Malmö are the top 54.12. So you can see there's a huge difference in terms of goals, getting goals. I caught this game with Halmstad. Halmstad, I got to say, they're a really good unit. They're a strong unit, to be honest. They're not an easy team to play against. They are I think they're the Burnley of this league, or the they just got this set style. I mean, they just peppered AIK with set pieces towards the end of the first half, and they couldn't get out of their own box. AIK, it was like bobbling around everywhere, clearing it. It would be another set piece, then it would be a corner, bobble around, and they just couldn't get rid of it. And eventually, one of the sort of second phase balls fell to the man Johansson, and he scored a tap in. Maybe shades of offside, VAR. I think if it was in Sweden, we would have looked at it. He just broke the line and just had a tap in. Basically, it was keeper saved it and it rebounded to him. He went crazy and the fans went crazy. This is a big win for Halmstad. Don't forget, AIK are a big club. And for Halmstad, don't forget, they're in the relegation battle. They need points. So that win has actually taken them out of the relegation zone now as well. Dropping in Degerfors, who we'll talk about in a bit. But so they needed this win, let alone get it. But once they had the lead, they defended quite robustly. Never really felt like AIK were going to kind of turn it around. Maybe you thought they might get one, but never really felt they'd turn it around. Had a couple of penalty shouts, but really soft penalty calls and things like that. So I don't think if you look at this stage of AIK's evolution, you'd expect them to be winning the title. But having got into it, they're still only 4 points behind. So don't forget that. I mean, they're not out of it, but I just think they probably are going to just fall a little bit short, to be honest, after these back-to-back defeats.
Shaun, how important is it that teams like Djurgården and AIK, and maybe you could even say Hammarby, Norrköping, or even IFK, how important is it that they keep Malmö honest in terms of Swedish football? Because is there a danger that Malmö could really dominate in a way sort of Rosenborg did if we're not careful?
100%. I remember listening to one of your earlier podcasts when you talk about, getting through to the Champions League group stages is phenomenal money in terms of Scandinavian football. And you can see that's why, Copenhagen have been so strong over the years, because they've been in those positions themselves. Malmö have always had probably more money than most clubs in Sweden, and now they've got treble more money than anybody else in Sweden. So, of course, now they can go out at the end of this season. They could quite easily win the title and go out and recruit, even more crazy if they so wish. I mean, they've already got a strong squad. So, absolutely, you need the other clubs to try and find a way to be competitive. But I'll always go back to the same principles. I don't care what level of football you play at and where you are. It will always come down to how you deal with your recruitment. And I think it's quite clear to say a lot of teams all over the world are really, really poor at recruitment, which when you think about it, you're going to spend a certain amount of money on players is kind of crazy, isn't it, when you think about that? I think, all the other clubs, they have to then be a little bit more clever in the transfer market to sort of find a few gems that are hidden away, a little bit like Brentford in a way, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, just before we move on to down Matt's at the bottom, I have to say, I was disappointed to see Elfsborg lose. They're the team I want to see win the league, just because it's a bit more of a Cinderella story in a way. I know they were second last year, but they rebounded well, 4 wins in a row, and they looked like they were going to beat Norrköping, but they conceded 2 very, very late goals, and they moved out a third. I'm gutted, Jonathan. I really am. That we've it looks like their race is run for Elfsborg. What went wrong against Norrköping? Did ill discipline ultimately cost them?
No, I don't think their race is run at all. I mean, it's only 3 points behind Malmö. I think that's a pessimistic take. I'm
a pessimistic.
Yeah, you're becoming a bit. You're becoming quite. You're becoming quite downbeat in your old age, aren't you? I think you didn't expect Glimt to do anything against Roma. Now you think they're Elfsborg are out of it. They're definitely not out of it. Someone on Twitter did point out, though, you're right, that the 3 points is probably 4 points because Malmö have got plus 25 goal difference compared to Elfsborg's plus 16. So
yeah, absolutely,
that's effectively an extra point, really.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think they're out of it. Elfsborg, it was an interesting game. I managed to catch this one. In the week they beat Degerfors, as I mentioned, away 2-1. Leo Wijsen and Jeppe Ockels, and then an Edvardsen goal. But the Norrköping game was crazy, to be honest. They took the lead. They went 2-1 up, and then it was just crazy hours. Simon Strand, he probably heard that he'd been picked in my fantasy team, as I try and take Steve on in the Nordic football title race, and he got
That's a
himself sent
battle.
off.
That is a battle.
That is a side battle, which is a tussle at the top for sure. But yeah, Simon Strand got himself sent off after 2 yellow cards. Crazy behaviour. And actually, what happened here when he walked off the pitch, there's a bit of controversy because he walked off the pitch and he actually knocked the camera out of the camera person's hand whilst they were filming, which is really just he's been really slammed for it in Sweden. It's really poor behaviour, to be honest. Really unprofessional. No need for it at all. He just knocked the camera out of the person's hand when he was walking off. A bit sly as well. He just kind of pretended he was walking and just shoved the camera off, and could do some serious damage to some expensive equipment. So he's got a lot of criticism for that. It may even be looked at. May face a longer ban. I don't know, but obviously he's going to miss a game. Strand's got a bit of a reputation in Sweden for being a bit nasty at times like that. So that's going to knock their defense maybe in terms of the organization. It's going to knock my fantasy team, so I'm going to have to find an alternative. But the only thing I'd say about, they were holding on Elfsborg in this game, but if you want to have 10 men away from home against any team in the league, I don't think Norrköping is the one. Linus Wahlqvist in the 78th minute, and then a brilliant goal from Alec Benro. It was like one of those, like Aguero, it was like Alec Benro kind of thing. In the last minute, he had a chance, and he's the top scorer in the league for a reason. And one thing I like about some strikers, Shaun, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, when a striker gets a chance in that sort of last 10 minutes in the penalty area, there's so many games I watch at this level where, like, for example, Degerfors, EFK is a good example is tonight. EFK should have finished Degerfors off, but so many breaks and things where they can't just put together the run that you need to get that ball in the net. Whereas on this occasion, I think Benro, the ball came to him in the box and it was just no hesitation, bang, absolutely walloped it home. A sort of pressure situation. If you missed that, it's 2-2. But he didn't make any mistake, and a big defeat for Elfsborg. They also went down to 9 men. Because Holst also gets sent off, so that's a big blow for Elfsborg. But if you look at it, when you say are they out of it, I don't think they are, because last 4 games, Varberg boys at home, Halmstad away, AIK at home, Örebro away, and they will be tough games because Halmstad are a solid side, Varberg good on the counter attack, AIK obviously are AIK, and Örebro you'd probably be relegated by them, but I don't think they're out of it because this Elfsborg side have shown a bit of resilience in recent weeks, so I think they're still in it.
They play good football as well, They work really hard. I like what they've done down there. They've been having a steady progression for a good few years now. And one of the coaches, when I was working up, the goalkeeping coach, he left Östersund and went to Elfsborg, and they're doing a great job down there.
You talked about recruitment as well, Shaun, and one thing I would say about Elfsborg this past 2 years, you talk about turning a team around from kind of a nothing team to title contenders. One thing they've done is they've got their recruitment right this past 3 years. And they've really nailed their recruitment. The likes of Jarjue, obviously Okuma, who's left now, he was a brilliant signing. Larson, they've got a lot of their recruitment right this last two years. They recruit to a good model. They've really turned things around.
And it's basically the point of success is how you do that recruitment. Even if you go back to Östersund, regardless of how you feel about how it's played, bringing in those certain players, we all know about the history of the players that went on and did really well for Östersund. And if you can get that right, you don't have to have loads and loads of money, but your recruitment needs to be spot on. You know that better than anybody, Jonathan.
Well,
exactly.
We move on now to matters at the bottom of the table, and the first official relegation has been confirmed from Allsvenskan. Östersunds are gone. They lost 3-0 to Varberg. It seems such a poor way to go, really, doesn't it, to lose to that sort of match? One of your old clubs, Shaun, and Jonathan. This look, at the start of the season, you were more optimistic than most about them. You did say that it could easily end in this way. Have even you been disappointed, Jonathan, about how poor they've been in terms of the points?
No, I think they've given it everything they can. At the end of the day, it's been a rough season for them. Obviously, we've had Rafa Roldan on, and he was part of the club, and then he kind of left, and they've had a manager leave. They've got a new chairman. They've had all kinds of things go on, but I think it is worth actually having a bit of a discussion about them, because this is the end of the era. This is the end of it. Since we started this podcast, obviously Östersunds was the big story. Graham Potter was there at the time. And really, this is the end of, like I say, this is the end of an era, really. And I think it's worth just briefly talking about that. You know, Graham Potter took over this club in 2011. He was there for 7 years. He's now doing wonders for Brighton. And I thought it was a very kind of poetic day. I think the same day that Graham Potter was at Anfield getting a 2-2 draw against Liverpool, you know, the mighty Liverpool kind of potential champions of England this season. You know, that great team who's just battered Manchester United 5-0. Graham Potter's getting a draw there, having been 2-0 down against Liverpool at Anfield, which is not easy with Brighton. On the same day, his Östersunds team that he built has been relegated. Finally, after all this time, and you know, if you look at it, they've been in the Allsvenskan since 2016. You know, Graham Potter joined when they were in the 4th division. You know, they were in Division 2 Norrland when he joined the club. Moved to 3rd tier Division 1 Norra, got them promoted from there. Then they had 3 years in Superettan and Tier 2, and obviously got them promoted in 2015. Kept them in Allsvenskan, got them to sort of 5th, 6th as well. And then he left, and obviously won the Swedish Cup. You know, and then you know, there's 2 sides to this Östersund story, really, because you know, when we announced on Twitter that Twitter at Nordic Football that they've been relegated, all you had from Swedish fans was like, goodbye, good riddance. You know, and you can't talk about their story without the side of it that is probably a bit darker, really. And we had a lot of questions actually on Twitter from fans saying, well, why are all these fans tweeting saying good riddance, and you know, what's so bad about Östersunds? And you know, I think we have to sort of touch on that as well. And the reason that they're kind of so hated by fans in Sweden is because obviously what's come out since Graham Potter's left, really, with the story about Daniel Schimberg, their former chairman. He's obviously been sentenced to prison for kind of, you know, financial crimes. It was reported, you know, in April 2018, the Swedish Environmental Crime Agency raided his housing company Östersunds Hem, where Daniel Schimberg was the CEO. His laptops were seized, and he was arrested on suspicion of financial crimes. He was then sentenced, but he's currently sort of going through an appeals system. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a 5-year ban from business for serious financial crimes. He's appealing it. He says it's, you know, but he's been talking about how difficult his life's been. He's not been able to get a job since. And, you know, we'll talk to Shaun in a minute. You've got inside information on all these people. You've worked with them. But just giving the overview in the sense that, you know, what that's basically done is it's created a feeling in Sweden that kind of Östersunds have been a little bit shady in terms of how they moved up through the leagues, which I think that there's kind of 2 sides to it, isn't it? Because you can say, yes, there is that, but at the same time, you can also look at the kind of how they built it organically in terms of Graham Potter and you know, the real human side of it that he built, the psychological side that he got right. You know, he's got a master's in, I think, sports psychology and that kind of thing, and he's very good manager. You know, diverting a little bit here, but I think if Manchester United need a new manager, I'm looking my eyes at him, to be honest. But yeah, you know, so there is kind of 2 sides to it, but I think it is really sad in a way that this fairy tale kind of has turned a bit sour, and you know, it's kind of ended with a lot of fans in Sweden basically saying, you know, good riddance, and we're glad to see you go. You know, this season was always going to be hard. They had transfer bans. A lot of fans as well in Sweden were not happy because basically the municipality of Sweden, the financial teams, they gave them a reprieve about their financial situation because they got I think a loan, and then the loan and the source of the loan has been kind of questioned. That you know, there's financial rules to basically stay in the league every season that you have to pass, and Östersunds managed to pass it because I think they had an injection of cash from a source, and that source has now been sort of questioned by fans within Sweden. So there's this sort of feeling that, you know, did they bypass that as well? Should they have actually been relegated before they have? They were given a 2-window transfer ban. They've still got a transfer ban till 2022. So that's why this season was so difficult for them. They couldn't sign any players. It was always going to be very tough for them. But yeah, they're now gone, and they will be in Superettan next season. It's the end of the era for Östersunds.
Shaun, they were one of your former clubs that you worked at.
Yeah.
Was there a twinge of sadness here, just seeing them go, even though it was kind of not inevitable, but it looked like it was going to be bleak? And sort of when you were at the club there, what's the general feeling, you know, with the public? You know, they're not the most popular club in Sweden, are they? Probably AFC Eskilstuna kind of rival them in that sort of way. Did you see this sort of happening? Could you sort of see this coming in the future?
You know, at the time when I left, no. because I felt they were still in a really good position, and they kind of were. And I feel like Ian was there. He was, I know Ian really well. He's a very diligent manager. He knows what he's doing. The whole episode of him leaving was not correctly done in my head. And I think they brought in a coach who lacks experience at that level. I think he got the way he wanted to play was totally not the way that Östersund's identity was. He was a little bit more direct. I think he did really well in the period when he came in, but I think to sustain that in the next season, which is this season now, was always going to be difficult. Even though they couldn't bring players in, if you look at their squad, they still got strong players there. They've actually not bad at all. Personal view is how they were run, and the support system was taken. A lot of stuff was taken away from the players. There's some rumours about a 27-hour round trip of playing a team away from home. Gothenburg, I think it was. They had to get a train and a bus, and then a bus and a train back. There's a lot of this stuff surrounding the team, and it's very, very difficult for players then to try and be focused on winning games. Basically, I think they made the managerial change way too late. I think if they got somebody in earlier, I think they could have turned it around. Because again, I would say their squad is not the worst squad in Allsvenskan. Absolutely not. So, for me, it's definitely sad because I know a lot of the people in and around the club. And I know how difficult it is. I think the fans are fully behind the players, but not behind the running of the club.
Jonathan, what is the legacy of Östersunds, do you think? I mean, we've had some great memories of them, really. I mean, I remember them going to the Emirates and beating Arsenal. I mean, you were there that night, weren't you? Actually in attendance. How are they going to be remembered, do you think, for this kind of great rise, but potentially now, a great fall?
Yeah, it's it's one of those ones where you could probably write a book on it. It is a if you look at the nature of football these days, there's sort of Netflix is kind of the Netflixization of football. Really, there's documentaries about these great teams and things like that. I think you can make quite a good documentary about Östersunds. Their incredible rise. They've launched probably one of in my opinion, I mean, Shaun, you'll know more about him than me, but in my opinion, potentially one of the great managers in football in the last maybe 10 years. If you look at what Graham Potter's done, he's completely revolutionized Swedish football. Shaun, I know you mentioned this off air as well, and I agree with it totally. He's completely changed Swedish football in my opinion. He's gone on to Swansea and he's gone on to Brighton, and I personally think he's doing incredible work at Brighton. If you look at what's actually happening there, they're a club that get things right off the field, Brighton, but he's bringing it all together now on the pitch, and I think that they'll continue to rise. I don't think it's a fluke where they are.
No.
But when you look at the Östersunds legacy, yeah, it will always be tainted, to be honest, because in Sweden they are hated. The fans don't like them. I think on the one side, I think I can see why, and I do get it. I think on the other side of it, I do think to a certain extent it is really sad, because if you look at it, I remember when we covered Östersund, Steve. I remember that they held Graham Potter held plays and things like that for the local community, and the players had to sort of put on performances at Christmas and things like that, and learn plays, and they did a lot of community work and charity work.
They did loads. I mean, when I was there, we had to do a musical. Exactly. Me and Ian were on the stage doing Sex Pistols. We were in a band singing the Sex Pistols, all dressed up like punks. I mean, exactly. He's the head coach and the assistant coach.
Exactly. So they've completely revolutionized. They brought a lot of joy to the town, I think, in the area, 100%. Which I don't think you can overlook just because of what's happened since. No. In terms of personal memories, or our own memories, or memories from the fans, of course, winning the Swedish Cup will always be a huge memory for them. That will never be forgotten for their fans. And then obviously going to Arsenal and beating Arsenal. I mean, there's been a lot of conversations around football at the moment, and what can you expect from a club, and what should clubs be achieving? I mean, that's something that will never be forgotten. Going to Arsenal and winning. I was at the game, as you mentioned. We covered it live. Don't forget they beat Galatasaray.
Yeah.
They went through an incredible run in that Europa League to get to where they
Atletico Bilbao. They beat
Bilbao. They had
the rumor has it that they were 1-0 or 2-0 down at halftime away in Östersund, And the captain walked off, and he said in Spanish, he says, "It's if I can swear, it's okay." He said, "It's fucking Barcelona in the woods." That's what he said, directly translated.
There you go. I mean, you know, like I say, you know, I've got a screenshot of the scoreboard at the Emirates when they beat when they beat Arsenal. Sorry, you know, Hossam Aish and Ken Sema, who's obviously now at Watford.
Yeah,
you know, that was when the Arsene Wenger days. So to go and beat Arsene Wenger's Arsenal will never be forgotten.
Only two teams won at the Emirates that year, and that was Man United and Östersund.
And don't forget, you know, they've brought a new style to Swedish football, I think, which has kind of been emulated by other teams. Yes. But at the end of the day, you know, there will be fans within Sweden who will always say it was, you know, maybe it was slightly murky how they achieved their success. And,
sorry to interrupt. I think there's a lot of it as well is that they brought so many foreign players in. You know, that they pushed it more than probably most other clubs have ever done in Swedish football, because at the end of the day, Daniel Schindberg's mentality was to try and beat the numbers game. Can Östersund ever compete with Malmö and AIK financially? No. So they tried to do something a little bit different, you know, and the whole culture thing and finding players from lower leagues and bringing them up. You know, there was you talk about recruitment. The job that Björn did there was outstanding. It was absolutely outstanding, and the coaching they did was outstanding as well. So it was a good recipe in that respect.
They beat Galatasaray. That'll do me. That'll make it. That. Although I'm not allowed to actually. I'm treading on hot water there, aren't I, Jonathan? Actually, so,
but then you know the home fans in Galatasaray, they applauded them.
Did they?
Yeah, they some of them burnt their season tickets and threw it at the managers and the players when they walked off. But when Östersund went to walk off after they went to their fans, they stayed and applauded them. So
that's fair play. Fair play. Obviously, that's how good a team they were under Graham Potter. I'm pretty sure.
Incredible.
You know, I'm pretty sure it was a similar story at the Emirates. So, well,
I mean, ultimately, the 27 in terms of history, the 2017 Swedish Cup will always be forgotten. Will always be remembered. Sorry, as well. You know, beating Norrköping in the final 4-1, absolutely battered them. That was I was in Sweden at that time, and that was, you know, that was the culmination really. Saman Ghoddos, you know, Hossam Aish, players like that who breezed them through that Swedish Cup. So a sort of, you could say a tainted legacy, but one that's fascinating. And I'm very sure that in years to come, it will be made in some sort of documentary, and it would be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I hope so.
Just a couple of things to tie off before we finish the episode. We must give our congratulations to Värnamo, who have been promoted from the Superettan. I must say, I've never heard of this club really before. Obviously, Jonathan's going to have to do his homework on them now. So congratulations to them. They've won Superettan. It looks close for second and third. Sundsvall, Helsingborg, Norrby and Trelleborg, and even Boys, Landskrona Boys has still got a shout for second and third. In Allsvenskan at the moment, Degerfors, Örebro look down, pretty much down. Degerfors are now in that 14th spot. Jonathan, you watched them against IFK, I do believe. Do you think they, I mean, it's close at the minute. Is it serious to getting dragged into trouble? Are Degerfors in major trouble now, Jonathan?
Based on the evidence I saw this evening, I think they're in trouble. I think they got a. If you were to ask me who I put my hat on in terms of Mjällby, Halmstad, and Degerfors to get a result, I would say the former two, Halmstad and Mjällby. You can always back Halmstad to get a draw somewhere. Mjällby, they're looking really good under Anders Torstensson. If you haven't listened to that episode, you know, beating Hammarby tonight 2-0, incredible result really. Hammarby continue to be a team that flatters to deceive. But yeah, Hammarby are kind of Mjällby are kind of, they're not out of it yet. They're only 3 points above them. Above Degerfors in 14th, but they're just climbing out of it quite nicely. What I saw from Degerfors this evening worried me, I'll be honest. They've lost back-to-back games now. They've next got Häcken away, then they've got Hammarby at home, Norrköping at home, Östersund's away. My issue with Degerfors is that I think they're kind of 3-4-3 system. I think they're kind of losing their way a bit. I thought in transitions they struggle in both ways, like transition from attack to defense and defense to attack. Whenever the ball break down, AFK attacking them, they didn't really know how to get up the pitch quickly. Pitch was a nightmare, so that didn't help. They ceded a lot of chances. EFK should have actually put this game to bed a lot easier than they did. One thing I've got to mention with EFK Göteborg, they are turning things around now. They're looking really good, as Shaun mentioned. Oscar Wilhelmsson, 18-year-old, he was in my 10 to watch in pre-season. He's got his first goal tonight, 18-year-old. He's got his first goal in Allsvenskan. He got the winner It was a lovely little turn and shot. He's been compared to Erling Braut Haaland, actually, by the way. Borussia Dortmund tried to sign him about a year or so ago, and he turned it down because he said he wants to play for EFK Göteborg for a few years before he moves on. But he is he's getting in the team now, and with Marcus Berg, and they're looking quite potent up front. But still, the wide players are not quite maybe productive enough in key moments, but they are starting to look a lot better at EFK. But yeah, as far as Degerfors go, where are they going to get their points from? The Hacken away is going to be a big game because I think they're going to need to get something from that, because Hammarby and Norrköping are going to be tough games. So yeah, I think if you were to ask me, I think Degerfors are in a little bit of trouble. And the other team I just wanted to mention, by the way, is Sirius. They've got 3 straight defeats now, and the next game's Mjällby away, so they're not out of it, by the way. Could just be an outsider. And I think in my pre-season previews, I had Sirius quite down there. So they've been pretty comfortable all season around the 10th place mark, but they're just getting sucked in now. They're only 2 points above the relegation playoff. So yeah, one to watch there.
Sirius could be in serious trouble.
Yeah, and by the way, just before we wrap up on Värnamo, this is an unbelievable story, and we're going to have something special for you guys next week. So subscribe, make sure you get your notifications on if you're following us on Twitter at Nordic Football, because we've been doing a little bit digging, and we might have a special guest that we can talk about next week, but I won't spoil anything. But yeah, in terms of Värnamo, this is going to be the first time in their 110-year history, 109 years. So for their 110th year anniversary, they'll be in Allsvenskan. First time ever. They've won tonight at AS Eskilstuna. And this is, when people are criticising Östersund, this is like the complete opposite. They've kind of done it in a way that, there's been a lot of comments on Twitter tonight saying, oh, we're going to have a proper team in Allsvenskan now instead of sort of AS Eskilstuna or Östersund. They're a team that's come up, they've been in the 3rd tier, come out of nowhere, really, almost, to be honest. And their ground is actually not even Allsvenskan ready. It only hosts 4,300 spectators, and they average about 1,000 fans. So I don't know how they turn this around, but we're going to dig into it and find out and bring you on the Nordic Football Podcast. But this is a massive, massive story. Real wonderful scenes tonight. They've got the 2nd smallest budget in Superettan, by the way.
Wow.
And yet have got promoted.
Only
Vasalund, who are bottom of the league, have a lower budget. So that tells you all about them. And one last little interesting tidbit of information on Värnamo. By the way, I took this from Sport Bladet, so I have to give them the credit for it. But they've said that Värnamo's club staff only has 3 full-time positions. That is as many as Malmö has just on analysts alone. So the entire club, there's only 3 full-time roles at Värnamo, and they're going to be an Allsvenskan team next year. So if they've got any job vacancies, hit us up. We might get out there. But Sean, maybe you should put in a word. But
have a word.
That's crazy, isn't it? They got less full-time staff than Malmö have analysts.
That is incredible. They came directly up last year, didn't they? They've gone up the 2 leagues.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't in the league that I was in last year with Brompo. They was in the other league. They won that league and went up into Superettan and now they've won that and gone into Allsvenskan. Am I correct there that they've gone straight through?
If they've got such a small budget, I would imagine there's a good fine chance of that. Yeah,
I think it is. I think the last team that did that was actually Brompoikina. They went up. They came out of the level they've come up now, went into Superettan and went straight up into Allsvenskan. Yeah. You're
right. I've just looked now. Landskrona actually came up from that league as well, and they're doing really well. So
that's right. Landskrona won the playoff.
Yeah. Yeah. So
they took what is it called? Dalkurd. Dalkurd lost against them, against Landskrona. Dalkurd went down into the league, and Landskrona came up into Superettan.
But one thing we do know, I mean, you mentioned there in terms of there's not much of a difference in the Superettan. You only got to look at Falkenberg, about to be relegated out.
Oh, unbelievable!
And they were in Allsvenskan just over a year ago. So
exactly.
There's the Superettan is a crazy league. And by the way, one final comment on that in terms of Superettan, which I think next week we'll talk about the 2nd divisions in both leagues, because HamKam should be promoted by then as well. But one other bit of information in that league, by the way, Falkenberg look like they could be going down to 3rd tier. And one other club that looks like they could be going down is Gais. Now, they're a massive club in Sweden, and they've had a battering tonight.
Yeah, let's talk. You want to talk about recruitment and getting everything wrong? Then that's a club who need to sort themselves out in that respect.
Yeah, not a good time for Gais. Huge club in Gothenburg, and
really big.
They're in big trouble now. They're in the relegation playoffs with time running out.
Well, I think that about brings this episode to an end. Shaun, you've got incredible stamina to last it with us.
No stress, no problem. I don't have to get up in the morning, so it's okay.
We very much appreciate your time, and also, I mean, from my own self personally, I wish you all the best of luck in for the future. Really, I think there's a lot more to come from Shaun Constable.
I hope so, absolutely. Yeah, but hey, it's a pleasure being on, guys, as always. So, absolutely great. Really enjoyed the chat.
Do you have a preference on your next role? Is it kind of a look in Sweden, Norway, or maybe even England, or is it just kind of see what happens, if you know what I mean? Because you straddled both countries.
Yeah, I mean, I put my CV in at Scunthorpe United now, but I think after I heard that there's 50 coaches applied for that job, it could be a little bit of a long shot. So, I have to just wait and see what comes up. There's been a few inquiries, but nothing like anything huge at the moment. So, yeah, just be patient and enjoy myself when I come over to England for a little bit, and fingers crossed I can pick up something. Be honest with you, I've had 2 years as a head coach. I would really like to get the opportunity again. I feel like the last 2 years I've learned so much. I think, what do they say, third time lucky? So fingers crossed.
I'm sure we're going to see you back on a football pitch very soon. I think it's in your blood, a bit like us probably.
Absolutely.
So wish you luck, and you might be the first person to ever be on the Nordic Football Podcast 5 times if you get a new job. So we will keep an eye on your progress very much with an eagle eye. Yeah. But I think that wraps it up for this week's show. It's been a longer episode, but hopefully a lot of insight from someone who's been in the game for many years and has a lot of insight to offer. So we'll be back next week. As I say, we're probably going to look at the second division in some detail. Hopefully bring you a special guest as well. So you can hit us up on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want to contribute to the show and to the running of it. And also hit us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. You can find my colleague Steve Wyss at Meatman Soccer on Twitter. You can find our guest today, Shaun Constable, at Shaun Constable as well on Twitter. And you can find me on Twitter at JFFootball, JFFUTBOL. So hit us up and leave a review on the iTunes or whatever. Leave a review. That'd be nice. Or give us 5 stars. But that's it for this week's show. We're out of here. Not long left in this season. So we're going to be covering it as we, the run-in. There's going to be a lot of big games coming up in the next 3-4 weeks. But keep it tuned on the Nordic Football Podcast. Thank you so much, Shaun. And thank you, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Goodbye. We'll see you next time. Thanks again to Shaun. Adios.